These are the most controversial Scooby-Doo villains from Mystery Incorporated, starting with a villain so bad that fans literally pretend their episode doesn't exist. In Season 1, Episode 22, called Night Fright, we meet the Humongonauts, and they're widely considered the most boring and pointless villains in Mystery Inc. history. These giant wrestler brothers are seeking revenge against their own brother's insurance company, which already sounds like the plot of a really bad soap opera. But it gets so much worse when you actually watch it. The Humongonauts had no real threat level, a forgettable design that looked like rejected WWE characters, and a motivation so weak that even kids could see through it. They're supposed to be these massive, intimidating wrestlers, but they spend most of their time complaining about insurance policies and family drama. The whole episode feels like filler content that someone threw together at the last minute. Fans consistently rank this episode as bottom tier because nothing about these villains made sense or felt threatening. Even their color-coded outfits seemed lazy. Reddit threads about worst Mystery Inc. villains always mention these guys first, and for good reason. But if you think bland wrestlers are bad, wait until you meet the villain that completely redefined what a Scooby-Doo antagonist could be. In Season 1, Episode 2, called The Creeping Creatures, Professor Pericles first appears, and this hyper-intelligent parrot literally broke every rule about what a Scooby villain could be. Unlike every other villain who gets unmasked and arrested at the end of an episode, Pericles becomes the main antagonist throughout the entire series, manipulating events from behind the scenes. This isn't just some guy in a costume trying to scare people away from treasure. Pericles is a former mascot of the original Mystery Inc., who betrays everyone, orchestrates elaborate evil plots, and even sacrifices other characters to gain ultimate power. He's got layered character development, genuine menace, and psychological manipulation that fans had never seen before in a Scooby-Doo show. What makes him truly terrifying is his intelligence and his complete lack of loyalty to anyone. Fans consider him the greatest Scooby-Doo villain of all time because he actually evolves and becomes more dangerous as the series progresses. He's not just scary, he's smart scary, which hits different when you're used to villains who get caught because they left obvious clues everywhere. Speaking of rule-breaking, our next villain tried to turn Scooby-Doo into a romance show, and fans hated every uncomfortable second of it. In Season 1, Episode 16, called Where Walks Aphrodite, we meet Sheila Altunian, who transforms into Aphrodite and uses supernatural love spells to win prom queen. This villain's plan was so weird that fans still argue about whether kids should have watched it, and parents definitely had some awkward conversations afterward. Sheila makes everyone in Crystal Cove fall in love with her, or with each other, creating this uncomfortable romance subplot that had zero real stakes or genuine threat. The whole episode feels like someone accidentally mixed a teen drama with a kid's cartoon and forgot which audience they were targeting. Fans criticized the flat characterization and the fact that her motivation was literally just winning a high school popularity contest through mind control. It's creepy when you think about forcing people to love you against their will, and it's boring because there's no real danger to anyone. The episode tries to be funny but lands in uncomfortable territory instead. Most fan discussions about this villain focus on how inappropriate the concept feels for a family show. But uncomfortable gets way worse when you meet the villain who represents everything fans love about Mystery Inc.'s darker storytelling. In Season 1, Episode 25 and throughout the series, the Freak of Crystal Cove appears as this twisted masked villain connected to the town's dark past and Fred's personal trauma. This villain's connection to Fred's family created some of the show's most shocking moments and emotional payoffs. The Freak drives the meta story forward and represents the perfect balance of classic Scooby design with genuinely unsettling psychological horror. Unlike other villains who just want money or revenge, the Freak is tied to decades of town secrets and family betrayal that go back generations. The mask design is simple but effective, and the way the character moves and speaks creates this aura of genuine menace. Fans love how the design stays true to classic Scooby aesthetics, while the storyline goes much deeper than usual Monster of the Week plots. The psychological stakes feel real because they're personal to Fred, and watching him discover the truth about his family makes the villain feel more impactful than typical Scooby antagonists. From family trauma to straight-up torture, our next hated villain crossed lines that fans couldn't forgive and parents definitely couldn't ignore. In Season 1, Episode 13, called When the Cicada Calls, Danny Darrow appears as the shadowy figure, and this deranged killer, living under the Blake mansion, orchestrates Saw-like death traps that made parents turn off the TV mid-episode. This villain created elaborate torture scenarios that were way too dark and disturbing for the series' tone. Danny Darrow felt like he belonged in a rated R horror movie, not a show that kids watch with their families. The torture-based plot made viewers uncomfortable in a bad way, crossing the line from family-friendly scary to genuinely disturbing horror. Fans criticized this episode for being unnecessarily grim, and many felt it was genuinely traumatic rather than entertainingly spooky. The traps he creates aren't just scary, they're designed to cause prolonged suffering, which feels wrong in a Scooby-Doo context. Online discussions about this villain often include warnings about the content being too intense for younger viewers. Thankfully, our next beloved villain proves you can be terrifying without being traumatic or crossing inappropriate boundaries. In Season 2, Episode 8 called Nightmare in Red, Crybaby Clown appears as this bank-robbing supernatural clown with psychological horror elements. Mark Hamill's voice work on this character gave kids nightmares in the best way possible, and his performance elevates the entire episode. This villain perfected the balance between scary and entertaining that Mystery Inc. was known for. Crybaby Clown is genuinely menacing while staying within the show's boundaries, and the memorable design combined with Hamill's signature voice acting made him consistently appear on fan-favorite lists. He's proof that you can create genuine scares without crossing into disturbing territory. The clown manages to be both chilling and fun to watch, which is exactly what Mystery Inc. did best. Hamill brings the same energy he used for the Joker but tones it perfectly for a family audience. The bank robbery aspect gives him clear criminal motivation, while the supernatural elements keep him firmly in Scooby-Doo territory. Unfortunately, not every animal-themed villain hit the same high notes or understood what made creature features work. In Season 1, Episode 8 called The Grasp of the Gnome, the Gator people appear as this backwoods mutant gator family terrorizing locals. These mutant hillbillies were supposed to be grotesque, but ended up just being gross without any real substance. The Gator people failed because of repetitive gags and weak plotting that relied entirely on shock value. They relied on cheap, gross-out humor instead of clever writing or genuine threat, and fans viewed this as one of Season 1's weakest episodes. The whole concept felt lazy, like someone just said, "What if alligators but people?" and called it a day without thinking through the implications. There was no real menace, no interesting backstory, and no memorable moments beyond just being disgusting to look at. The family dynamic could have been interesting, but instead just became an excuse for more gross visual gags. Luckily, the show knew how to do animal monsters right, as our next beloved villain proves with perfect execution. In Season 1, Episode 3 called The Secret of the Ghost Rig, the man crab appears as this monstrous crab-human hybrid abducting beachgoers with perfect 1950s B-movie energy. This crab-human hybrid terrified kids while making them laugh at the same time, which is incredibly difficult to pull off. The man crab embodied everything great about classic monster movies, while updating the concept for modern audiences. The design was genuinely threatening, the beachgoer abductions created real stakes, and the whole aesthetic perfectly captured that retro horror vibe that made old creature features so memorable. Fans praised how it created genuine tension while maintaining the show's comedic elements perfectly. When the gang yells, "Man crab!" it became an instant meme because the absurdity was perfectly balanced with actual menace. The episode works because it takes the concept seriously while acknowledging how ridiculous it sounds. But even great monster design can't save a villain with a terrible concept and poor execution. In Season 1, Episode 13 called When the Cicada Calls, the cicada creature appears alongside Danny Darrow, and this Bug Monsters episode made viewers itch just from watching it. This insect-based villain unleashing deadly bugs around Crystal Cove relied too heavily on gross-out gags over clever writing or interesting character work. The cicada creature was criticized for lack of originality and over-reliance on disgusting visuals instead of interesting plot or character development. The whole concept felt like someone watched too many B-movies about killer insects and forgot to add any actual creativity or original ideas. Fans found the episode uneven because it focused more on making people uncomfortable than telling a good story. The swarm attacks are visually impressive but ultimately feel pointless because there's no real emotional investment in stopping this particular threat. Speaking of character development, our next beloved villain had the best redemption arc in the entire series. In Season 2, Episode 12 called The Hodag of Horror, and throughout Season 2 reveals, Marcy Fleming transforms into Obliteratrix, and Hot Dog Water's villain turn shocked fans who thought they knew everything about her character arc. Marcy's transformation created the series' most compelling character twist and showed how supporting characters could become genuinely important. Her evolution from sidekick to technical genius vigilante included emotional backstory, genuine skills, and complex motivations that added real stakes to the show beyond simple Monster of the Week plots. Fans loved how her loyalty turn made sense based on everything that had happened to her character throughout the series, and her technical expertise brought a different kind of threat that felt fresh and modern. She's not just smart, she's resourceful and emotionally invested in her goals, which makes her both sympathetic and dangerous. Unlike our next hated villain, who added absolutely nothing to the show except runtime. In Season 2, Episode 15 called The Theater of Doom, the Graveyard Ghoul appears with basic design and no real challenge for the gang. This villain was so generic that fans literally call him Filler Monster in online discussions. The Graveyard Ghoul represents everything wrong with filler episodes that exist just to meet quotas. Generic motives, predictable plot, zero memorable moments, and no character development whatsoever. Fans recognize this as a placeholder episode that existed just to fill time rather than advance any meaningful storylines or provide interesting entertainment. Even the design looked like a rejected concept from earlier Scooby series, and the theater setting was wasted on such a boring antagonist. Fortunately, our final beloved villain reminds us why Mystery Inc. was special and why it's still considered the best Scooby series. In Season 1, Episode 5 called The Song of Mystery, the slime mutant appears as this gooey monster terrorizing Crystal Cove's children, and this creature hit different because the threat felt real and personal. The slime mutant created the perfect atmospheric horror episode that showcased everything Mystery Inc. did well. The unique powers, tangible threat to innocent victims, and genuinely creepy abilities made this villain memorable among fan favorites and a perfect example of the show's elevated storytelling. The atmospheric design and the fact that kids were specifically being targeted made the stakes feel higher than usual monster encounters. It proved that Mystery Inc. could do classic Monster of the Week episodes while still maintaining the elevated storytelling that made the series special and different from previous Scooby shows. If you want to see how these villains compare to the worst monsters from the original Scooby-Doo series, that video is right there.